The mud-covered stranger. The wind screamed across the desert plains of Calnor 3. Sand flew like knives through the air. Broken machines lay buried under thick layers of dust. Most people stayed inside during sandstorms. But Ray wasn't most people. He was a scavenger. He searched the scrap fields for old parts, broken tech, and anything useful. That day he had gone farther than usual. Too far. The storm had passed, leaving only silence. Until something moved. Ray stopped. He stood beside an old transport wreck, half buried in sand, metal twisted like bones. He had just pulled open a broken door when he heard it, a soft sound, a breath, a cough. He turned. Then he saw it, a figure, lying in the dirt, covered in thick brown mud, mixed with sand and oil. Not a human. Thin arms, pale skin beneath the muck, hair matted with debris. She was shaking. Alive. Ray dropped his tools and rushed over. "Hey, can you hear me?" The figure moved slightly. A face turned toward him, barely visible under the mud. A pair of glowing violet eyes blinked weakly. Then, a whisper. "Please, help me wash." Ray's mouth opened, but no words came out. He had seen aliens before, but never like this. This woman wasn't just dirty. She was covered in something heavy, wet, and sticky. She couldn't move properly. Her fingers barely twitched. Ray reached for her gently. "I've got you. Hold on." He pulled her free from the wreckage, carefully dragging her to the shade. Her skin made soft cracking sounds as the dried mud broke. She winced. Ray pulled out his water pouch and tried to clean her face. The mud began to slide off. Underneath, smooth, bruised skin, faint scars, scratches, symbols burned into her neck. Not tattoos. Branding. "Who did this to you?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She just kept whispering the same thing. "Help me wash. Please. I can't breathe." Ray realized something then. This wasn't normal mud. It wasn't just dirt. It was part of her biology. Some kind of secretion or weapon that had hardened over time. Maybe it protected her during the storm. Maybe it was killing her now. Either way, she needed help, and fast. Ray lifted her carefully. She was light, too light. She didn't fight, didn't speak again. Her body was cold, despite the heat. By the time he reached his shelter, the sun had dipped low. He kicked open the door and laid her on the wash bench near his water tank. He turned. On the spray nozzle, clean water rushed out. The woman flinched, but didn't scream. As the water hit her, the thick layer of mud cracked, then began to melt off her skin like wax. The smell was sharp. Like chemicals in blood. Ray kept going. Spray, wipe, rinse, again and again. She coughed up dark sludge. Then finally, she opened her eyes, clearer this time, less fear, more trust. "You're safe now," Ray said softly. "I'm Ray. What's your name?" She blinked slowly, then whispered, "Elira." He gave her a blanket and wrapped it around her carefully. Her skin shimmered faintly now. Patterns glowed along her arms, beautiful and strange. Her voice was hoarse. "Thank you." Ray nodded. "You don't need to thank me. You just rest." She looked at the water still running, then at her own hands. She whispered again, "I never thought I'd feel clean again." Outside, the wind picked up, and deep under the wreck where he had found her, a small light blinked red, a tracking signal, activated by touch. Far away, aboard a dark ship drifting in orbit, someone saw that signal. A voice growled, "She survived. Send a team." A request. No human expected. The water kept running. Even after Elira stopped shaking, even after most of the thick brown mud had peeled from her skin, Ray didn't turn the nozzle off. Not yet. Something about her made him careful. Not just gentle, but watchful, as if she could disappear again, like a ghost. She sat on the bench now, weak but upright, wrapped in a blanket. Her skin was smooth, marked with strange pale blue patterns that almost glowed. Her breathing was slower, but something in her eyes said, "It's not over." Ray poured warm water over her arms, using a clean cloth to carefully remove the last layer of dried gunk. Then he asked softly, "Why was that stuff choking you? What is it?" Elira's eyes didn't meet his. "It's part of me," she said. "Or it used to be." Ray waited. She hesitated, then continued. "When I was a servant, they made us wear skin suits, chemical coats. It was sprayed onto our bodies, meant to protect us from toxic air on mining planets." She paused. "It also stopped us from running away." Ray's heart sank. "Like armor? Like a cage?" She pulled the blanket tighter. "I escaped, but I couldn't remove it on my own. If it dries too long, it fuses with skin. We can suffocate in it." She looked up, and her voice cracked. "I was dying. Even before you found me." Ray didn't know what to say, so he didn't. He just reached for another cloth and began wiping her hands, gently, like she might break. And still, she let him. No flinch, no fear now. Just silence and gratitude. She looked around the shelter. Small, dusty. Tools on every shelf, but it was clean, safe. More than anything, it wasn't a cage. She whispered, "Are you a soldier?" Ray chuckled. "Me? No. Just a mechanic. Fix things. Find parts. Sometimes old food packets." Elira tilted her head. "Then why? Help me?" His hands paused. Then he said simply, "Because you asked." That answer seemed to confuse her more than anything else so far. Later that night, she stood slowly and walked to the water tank. Her legs were shaky, but she didn't fall. She looked at her reflection in the metal panel. Her face. Her real face. She hadn't seen it in years. Ray watched from the side. She ran a hand down her cheek, then across the back of her neck, touching something under the skin. A bump. Small. Round. Ray moved closer. "What is that?" "A tracker," she whispered. "Hidden deep. They put it there when I was young. If I run, it pings." She turned to him. "I think I activated it when I crawled out." "They know." Ray's eyes narrowed. "How long?" 2 days. Maybe less. He walked to the tool rack, pulled out a scanner, held it near the bump. The screen flashed red. "Still live," he muttered. Elira turned away. "I'll leave in the morning." Ray stepped in front of her. "No." She froze. "You're not going back out there," he said. "Tracker or not, we'll deal with it." She looked at him, stunned. "You don't even know me. I know you didn't deserve that mud prison. That's enough." She lowered her eyes, and for the first time, she nodded. They worked through the night. He built a blocker, scrap metal wrapped with signal-dampening mesh, attached it to the back wall, then rigged a decoy ping transmitter from a broken drone. By morning it was ready, and Elira, she stood straighter, clean, awake, alive. But far above the planet, inside a ship as dark as night, a red dot blinked on the main screen. A voice said, "The target is awake." The human interfered. "Send ground team." Meanwhile, inside Ray's shelter, Elira looked at her reflection again. This time, she smiled. A little. Just enough. She didn't know how to ask. The next morning was still. No wind. No noise from machines. Just the soft sound of steam hissing from Ray's kettle and the quiet clinking of tools in the background. Ray had already been up for hours, fixing the cracked water filter. He moved slowly, trying not to disturb Elira. She was resting on the cot, eyes open, watching him. Her skin had changed again overnight. The faint glowing patterns had dimmed, now soft like ink under the surface. She looked less alien, more like someone real, someone whole. Ray handed her a cup of warm tea. She took it, carefully, sipped it once and stared into the cup like it was made of gold. He smiled. You don't have to hold it like it's going to bite. She glanced at him. It's warm. That's kind of the point. No, she said softly. I mean, it's warm, and no one is yelling. Ray blinked, then looked away. She wasn't trying to be dramatic. That was just her normal. He set a small food tray near her. Nothing fancy, just steamed bread and preserved fruit. She looked at it but didn't touch it. He waited a moment, then asked, "Not hungry?" She nodded quickly. "I am. I don't know if I'm allowed." That made him freeze. Then he knelt down beside her, voice gentle. "You don't need permission to eat. Not here. You're safe, Illyra." She stared at the food for a long moment, then finally reached out. Her hands were still shaky. But she ate. Slowly. Later, Ray showed her around the shelter. "Here's the comm system," he said. "I keep it disconnected from the network. Too risky, but it works for local frequency." She didn't respond, just walked beside him, silent. When they reached the workbench, she stopped, stared at the tools, then whispered, "Do you fix things for money?" "Sometimes," he said. "Mostly I fix things so they don't fall apart." She picked up a bent bolt and turned it between her fingers. "I want to help. You don't have to." She nodded. "I know. But I want to." The next few hours passed quietly. She watched him repair a solar unit, then handed him tools, organized wires, wiped parts clean. Ray noticed something strange. She moved carefully, not just slow, but like she expected to be hit if she dropped anything. When she accidentally knocked over a spanner, she flinched and stepped back. "Sorry," she said instantly. "Sorry, I wasn't trying." Ray held up a hand. "Hey, it's fine. No one's angry." She looked down. That's hard to believe. That night, as the heat faded from the desert outside, Ray sat beside the small fire inside the shelter. Illyra was staring at the flickering light. "Can I ask something?" she said. "Sure. What would you do if you were finally free, but didn't know how to live?" Ray thought for a while, then said, "I'd start small. One breath at a time. One day at a time." She nodded slowly, then whispered, "Then tomorrow, I want to learn how to make tea." Ray smiled. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Far away, aboard the dark ship, a soldier checked the tracker log. The human's blocker was working, mostly, but not for long. A command was typed. "Prepare landing team. Confirmed signal pulsing. At 0.2%. Target still active. Approach at night." Inside the shelter, Illyra finally slept without shaking. And Ray? He sat at the door with his old rifle beside him, because now it wasn't just about protection, it was about giving someone a chance to live. Her past was made of chains. The fire crackled low. Outside, the desert winds had quieted, but inside, Ray's shelter, the silence felt heavier than ever. Illyra sat cross-legged on the floor, hands in her lap, eyes distant. She hadn't spoken much that day, not since she'd asked about what to do when you're free. Ray gave her space. He didn't push, didn't ask, but he stayed close, quietly working just there, and that somehow made her feel ready. "I want to tell you something," she said suddenly. Ray looked up from the wires in his hand. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath, then pulled the collar of her shirt aside. Across her back, long, pale scars ran from shoulder to waist. Some were smooth, others raised and sharp. "These were earned," she said. "Not in battle, but in silence." Ray said nothing. She continued. "I was born into a labor caste. My people don't use chains made of metal. They use rules, laws, roles. You obey, or you vanish." Her voice was flat. Tired. "I was good at following, until I wasn't." She rolled down her sleeve. "They said my thoughts were too loud, that I asked too many questions, that I noticed things I wasn't supposed to." "What kind of things?" Ray asked gently. "People going missing," she said. Workers sent to retraining. Friends who came back with eyes full of nothing. She stared at the fire. So, they punished me, put me on the lowest rung, sent me to a mining camp, sprayed my body with protective coat, but that coat, it wasn't protection, it was control. Ray felt his fists clench. They used it to keep you there. To keep us silent, she said. If we ran, we couldn't survive outside. It fused with our skin, blocked oxygen. It made us dependent. She looked at him, and for the first time her voice rose. I hated it. Every time it dried on my arms, it felt like the world was deciding I was nothing, that my breath wasn't mine. Her hands shook now. And worst of all, I started to believe it. Ray reached for her hand. She let him take it. Soft. Careful. He didn't say, I'm sorry. He didn't say, that's terrible. He just held it. And she kept going. There was a riot one day. Someone snapped. A fire broke out in the storage bay. While the guards ran for control, I ran for the waistline. She looked up. That's how I ended up in your world. Crawling from scrap, covered in what they forced on me. Ray nodded, slowly. You didn't just crawl out of the dirt, Elira. You escaped a system. That takes strength. She stared at him. No one's ever said that to me. Later that night, Elira stood alone at the mirror near the water tank. She looked at her back, at her skin, at her scars. Then she touched the largest one, not with shame, but with claim. Ray handed her a small toolkit the next morning. For what? She asked. For fixing something, he said. Anything you want. She smiled. It was small, but real. I want to start with the storage box, the one that keeps sticking. He nodded. You got it. They worked side by side again. No instructions, just teamwork. When Rinny from Next Shelter came over asking for parts, Elira handed them without flinching. When Kale, the merchant, offered trade, she nodded with confidence. Bit by bit, she was no longer hiding, she was becoming. But far away, the dark ship moved into lower orbit. Inside, a cold voice gave the final order. The target has been located. The protector is irrelevant. Prepare to erase the structure and take the girl alive. Back on the desert floor, Ray and Elira shared tea beneath a shade panel. And for the first time, Elira whispered, I'm not afraid of them anymore. Ray nodded. I know. But we still get ready. She looked at him. What if they destroy this place? Ray smiled faintly. Then we build something better. Again. The ones who came to take her back. The sun was setting behind the scrap hills when the silence broke. Ray heard it first, a low hum, too smooth for a storm, too steady to be wild. He stepped out of the shelter and looked up. A shadow moved across. The sky, sleek, black, no lights, a slaver transport. He ran inside. Elira, it's time. She was already on her feet. She didn't ask questions, didn't panic, just nodded and followed. Ray grabbed the small pulse rifle he kept hidden under the floor. Old, dusty, and not very accurate. But it was enough. He had no army, just tools, traps, and will. The ship landed half a kilometer away, close enough to see, but not close enough to hear. Dust blew outward as the landing gear hit the ground. Then, the doors opened. 3 figures stepped out, tall, armored, moving with perfect rhythm. One of them carried a glowing staff. Another held a tracker pad. The last had empty hands, but a face full of cruel confidence. They walked like they owned the ground beneath them. Ray and Elira stood in front of the shelter, waiting. The lead slaver stopped 10 meters away. He looked at Elira, then at Ray, then back again. Return the asset, he said coldly, and we'll leave the human in one piece. Ray stepped forward. You're not taking anyone. The slaver tilted his head. You've been warned. Elira stepped beside Ray. I'm not yours anymore. The second slaver raised his weapon. Ray didn't move, but the moment the beam fired, everything changed. From the roof, a hidden scrap panel flipped open and released a blinding flash grenade, Ray's first trap. The slavers staggered. Ray grabbed Illyra and pulled her behind the wall as a second trap exploded, releasing a shockwave made from a broken mining charge. Sparks flew. The ground shook, and then gunfire. Ray took a shot, missed, took another, hit one slaver in the leg. The man growled and fired back, nearly hitting the generator post. The shelter trembled. Ray reloaded. Illyra, stay low. But she didn't. She stood and picked up a piece of piping, glowing from the heat of the blast. When one of the slavers breached the wall, she swung hard, smashing his visor and knocking him to the ground. Her hands bled. But she didn't stop. Not this time. Not anymore. Ray joined her. Together they fought through the smoke and sparks. One slaver fell. The second retreated. The leader, the one with cold eyes, stood his ground. He raised his staff. "You are not free," he said to Illyra. "You are property." She stepped forward, covered in dust and sweat. "I am not property," she whispered. "I am power." Then she pressed the button Ray gave her. EMP charge. The leader's armor died instantly. Lights out. Comms dead. He looked at her, stunned. Ray aimed his rifle. "Now," he said. "Get off our land." The slaver didn't reply. He turned and walked back toward his ship, dragging his wounded men with him. No more threats. No more words. Just defeat. The ship lifted off minutes later. And this time, it wasn't followed by fear. It was followed by silence. Real silence. The kind that means they're not coming back. Ray dropped to the ground, breathing hard. Illyra knelt beside him. They looked at each other. Neither smiled. Neither cried. They were too tired, too full. But she whispered, "You stood with me." He nodded, "And you stood for yourself." Later that night, she sat outside under the stars, wearing clean clothes, fresh bandages, a free mind. Ray joined her with 2 cups of tea. She looked at him and said, "Next time, I want to fight even harder." He laughed. "You already fought. Harder than most warriors I know." She raised her cup. "To not being property." Ray raised his too. "To building something that no one can take." They drank. Together far away, the slaver ship drifted into the shadows. But no message was sent. No alert. Because failure was shameful. And this time, they had failed. The ritual of true names. The wind was soft that morning. After the fight, the junkyard felt different. Not quieter, but lighter. For the first time since Illyra arrived, there was no tension in her walk, no fear in her hands. She moved like someone unchained. Ray noticed it too. She was still herself, but more. She asked for time alone, then returned wearing a cloak made from repurposed cloth and lined with glowing thread from an old mining suit. She had cleaned the scars on her back. She had oiled her skin and braided her hair. She looked radiant. Ray watched as she placed a small stone bowl in the center of the shelter. She filled it with water, then looked at him. "Will you sit with me?" she asked. He nodded and knelt across from her. She took a deep breath, then said quietly, "Among my people, there's a ritual. One we do only once, when we become who we truly are." Ray didn't speak. He listened. It's called naming of the soul. Not the name others give us, not the label from birth, but the one we choose when we are finally free. She placed her hands into the bowl. "The water must reflect the stars," she whispered. "Even during the day." Ray looked up, confused, then noticed the ceiling panel above them had been cleaned, revealing the faint view of daylight stars beyond the shelter's sunshield. "I cleaned it last night," she said with a small smile. "Just in case." She closed her eyes, and for a moment, there was silence. Then she spoke. not in common tongue, but in her own language, soft, rhythmic, full of emotion. The bowl's water shimmered, her arms glowed faintly, then her voice returned. To basic, I name myself, a pause. Elira Sattel of the Undimmed. She looked at Ray. That is who I was always meant to be. Ray's voice was soft. It's beautiful. No one's ever heard it before, she said. You're the first. Why me? Because you saw me when I was nothing, she whispered, and you still stayed. She placed a small crystal next to the bowl. It's tradition to give a gift to the first witness. A token. Ray smiled and reached forward. It was a simple pendant, shaped like a spiral. He turned it in his hand. What does this mean? It means steady light. A guide. You think I'm a guide? She nodded. You showed me the path back to myself. That night they sat under the open sky. Ray cooked. Elira helped. They didn't talk much, but the silence felt full, like nothing else needed to be said. Later, as they prepared to sleep, Ray asked, So, what happens after a naming? She grinned. We live. The next morning, she painted a symbol above the door, her new name sigil. This wasn't just a shelter anymore, it was her home. And far across the stars, a whisper reached the ears of her kind. One of the lost has taken a name. The undimmed rise again. A clean soul underneath. The days after the naming were quiet, not empty, just calm. Elira no longer asked permission to do things. She moved with confidence. She smiled often. Ray noticed the way she greeted people who passed the junkyard gate. Now, with her chin high, with her eyes clear. She was no longer hiding. She had started teaching him small things about her culture. How to tie a memory knot. How to brew calming roots without killing the flavor. How her people wrote messages in curved, light strokes instead of ink. Ray loved learning it, not just because of what she taught, but because of who she had become while teaching it. One afternoon, while repairing a broken solar panel, Ray looked up and saw her drawing in the sand. He walked over and asked, What's that? It's a pattern for a new home design, she said. One with 2 rooms, one for you and one for me. Ray raised an eyebrow. Oh, thought you were tired of metal walls. She smiled. I am, but I'm not tired of you. He sat down beside her. Watched the way her fingers shaped the lines. Then he said softly, You know, when I found you, I thought you were going to die. I almost did, she replied. But you didn't. No, she said. You helped me wash. He looked at her. And now? She looked back. Now I'm clean where it counts. They worked on the new home together. Not big, just better. Stone walls, wooden frames from crashed cargo pallets, new filters, bright lights, and a door she carved her sigil into with pride. Visitors came sometimes. Other ex-workers, other refugees. Some just needed repairs. Others stayed. Ray and Elira welcomed them all. Because this place wasn't a shelter anymore. It was a haven. One evening, Ray brought out the old cloth she had first worn, the one soaked in mud and grime. He handed it to her. I kept this, didn't know why. She took it, turned it over, then threw it into the fire without hesitation. That's not who I am anymore, she said. Ray nodded. Agreed. She reached for his hand, held it, and said softly, You cleaned more than my skin, Ray. You gave me back my life. Later that night, under the stars, they sat on the roof of their new home. Elira laid her head on his shoulder. He looked down at her, half smiling. You still don't ask before you sit there. She grinned. I don't have to ask anymore. I belong here. Ray looked up at the sky, then whispered, Yeah, so do I. Far beyond the desert, in places still ruled by fear, the story of the human and the washed woman began to spread. Not as a war story, not as a rebellion, but as a quiet legend. There was once a woman covered in chains, and a man who used kindness to break them. And every time someone else ran or needed safety, they remembered, sometimes freedom begins with a wash and ends with a home.